Hello, amazing soul buddies. So I don't know if you recall in my previous video, that is if you watched my previous video, where I said I would love to recreate this particular gown, this particular A-shaped gown for myself, and I actually did. So this is the gown you're seeing on me right now, and you can see how beautiful it is looking. So I actually added little tweaks to it. I reduced the A-shape flare. Yes, for myself, I actually reduced the A-shape flare to see if it's going to look more beautiful, and it sure did. And I just could not wait to show you guys. Meanwhile, in this video, we're going to learn how to make this beautiful bubu gown that has this asymmetric neckline with tiny stripe and tassel design. And you might have noticed my love for bubu gowns these days, especially classy bubu gowns here. I love how versatile bubu gowns are. There's something you can wear almost everywhere and anywhere. So if this is something you're interested in learning how to make this particular type of bubu gown, then do well and keep watching. And always remember to practice, because like I would always say, practice makes perfect. Here are some of the items I made use of. I made use of the Ankara fabric. You can actually make use of any fabric of your choice. I made use of the Ankara fabric, and I made use of 4 yards for this. Also, I'm making use of the aiming gum as well, and I'll also be making use of the bias as well, and also I'm making use of the tassel design, which is obviously not here, and some other items. So I'll be drafting directly on this fabric. Yes, there's no need for pattern paper. So I'll go ahead and open up my fabric. Please just watch. I just want to show you how I get to fold. If you've watched how I draft out bubu gowns by now, you should be good with folding your fabric, how to fold your fabric for bubu gowns. So for this particular types of bubu gowns actually, so first of all, I'll go ahead and open up the fabric like this, making sure that the right side of the fabric is facing me, so that when I get to fold it, the wrong side will end up facing me. So after arranging it properly, the next step is to go ahead and bring in the gown length. That is how long I want this gown to be, and then add 3 inches to it. That is 2 inches for hemming allowance and 1 inch for any extra miscellaneous stuff. So my gown length, that is how long I want this gown to be, is 58 inches plus 3 inches gives me 61 inches. So I'll go ahead and place my tape from the beginning of the fabric like this. I'll place it and I'll measure out 61 inches, and I'll use my chalk to mark out where the 61 inches stop. And from that 61 inches point, I'll go ahead and fold my fabric into 2 like this, from where I marked that 61 inches. I'll fold it into 2 like this, and after folding it into 2 like this, I'll go ahead and fold this again like this. And folding it this way gives me the advantage of drafting both the front and back pattern at the same time. So if I'm to count this, I will be having, let me count it for you so you'd see. So you can see 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll be having 4 folds. So that is that for that. And this part of the fabric will serve as the side for drafting the side, and this side will be for drafting the center back and center front. That is this side of the fabric where there is no opening. And with that being said, I'll dive right into the drafting. So the first thing, I'm going to come down from the beginning of my fabric by 1 inch like this to get that starting line or top line. So this is very optional. You can decide to do this, you can decide not to do this. If you've watched some of my videos on bubu gowns, you would see that I get to do this sometimes and I do not get to do this sometimes. So it's just as the spirit leads. So I'll go ahead and join all the lines together, those little dots together, to get a straight line like this. So this is the starting line or the top line. So next, on the starting line, I'm going to mark out half of my shoulder measurement. So my shoulder measurement is 16 divided by 2 gives me 8, and that is what I've marked out. Next, for the neck width, I'm marking out 3 inches here, and for the neck depth, I'm marking out 3 inches as well for the front neck depth. And then I'll go ahead and bring in my curve rule to connect the neck width to the neck depth to get that basic round neckline. Although this is not what I'm going for, I'm just doing this for people that would want a basic round neckline, just giving them a guideline. Then for the back neck depth, I'll come down by 1 inch. Please take note that 1 inch is the standard back neck depth for every individual, for whole individual. So I'll go ahead and connect the neck depth to the neck width like this to get the back neckline. Next, I'll decide how long I want the sleeve of this bubble gown to be. So for me, I want it to be 13 inches long. So from the shoulder here, I'll mark out 13 inches. You can see I place the 13 inches from the shoulder measurement that I mark out, and from that 13 inches I'll come down by 1 inch like this to get the shoulder slant or slope, and I'll connect this to the neck width. So this makes the sleeve, the bubble sleeve, you know, a little bit relaxed. So I'll connect this to the neck width like this. Once this is done, the next step is to go ahead and mark out the armhole depth. And for bubble gowns, to get the armhole depth, you need to measure the round armhole. Now the round armhole I am working with is 18.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and divide it by 2, and whatever I get, I'll add 1 inch to it. So 18.5 inches divided by 2 gives me 9.25, plus 1 inch gives me 10.25. So I'll go ahead and mark out 10.25 from this slanted line here. I hope you understand. So after marking it, I'll connect this to the slanted line using my rule. So I'll go ahead and bring in my rule and connect this straight down to the slanted line. Once this is done, I'll go ahead and divide the biggest round bodice measurement by 4. So if the hip is the biggest measurement, you make use of the round hip measurement. If it is the bust, you make use of the round bust measurement. And whatever you're making use of, you divide it by 4 and mark it out. So for this, the bust is the biggest measurement. So the round bust measurement is 41. Divided by 4 gives me 10.25. And I'll go ahead and mark it out on this armhole depth point like this. You can see the way I'm placing my tape. So I'll go ahead and mark out 10.25 here like this. Also take note that not everyone likes a big bubble gown, and I am part of those people. So for the ease allowance, I'll be making use of 3 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark out 3 inches for the ease allowance like this. I do not like a bubble gown that is very big, so 3 inches ease is okay for me, and I'll be adding half an inch to it for sewing allowance. So your ease allowance can be 5 inches, 4 inches, 6 inches. It all depends on how big you want your bubble gown to be. So after marking out the half an inch for sewing allowance, I'll go ahead and connect the armhole depth to this half an inch. So I'll just go ahead and bring down the armhole depth like this. I'll connect it straight down, and when I get to the half an inch, I'm going to curve it like this, give it a nice curve like this. After doing this, I'll go ahead and mark out how long I want this gown to be. And earlier on I stated I wanted it to be 58 inches, so I'll be adding 2 inches for hemming allowance, making it 60 inches. So I'll go ahead and place my tape from the starting line, and I'll mark out 60 inches like this. So I'll also go ahead and do the same thing on the other side of the gown like this. I'll place my tape from the starting line and mark out the 60 inches like this. And I'll go ahead and bring in my rule to connect these dots together to get a straight line like this. Moving on, at the hemline here, I'll also impute what I did around the bust as well. I'll mark out the round bust measurement here as well after dividing it by 4, and I will also add the 3.5 inch allowance here as well, and I'll go ahead and connect this to the hem. So for me, I always have issues with drawing a straight line, marking out a straight line. So what I'm doing right now, I'm just imputing all these measurements randomly on this part of the bubble gown of the fabric, so that when I'm connecting from the bust to the hem, I would, achieve a straight line. So that's what I am just doing to ensure I get a straight line when connecting from the bust to the hem. So now that I have marked it out randomly, I'll just go ahead and just connect like this. Are you seeing it? So if you don't have issues with straight line, just go ahead and connect directly from the bust to the hem without doing all of this. Next, at the sleeve hem here, I'm going to come in by half an inch like this, just to make the sleeve more relaxed. So I'll come in by half an inch and I'll connect this back to the slanted line. So this gives a more relaxed bubble sleeve. So I'll just go ahead and clean this other line. Moving on, I'll go ahead and add half an inch at the sleeve hem for hemming allowance, because I want to use a bias for turning the hem. But if you're not making use of a bias, add 2 inches for hemming allowance. So at the shoulder, I'll also be adding half an inch for hemming allowance like this as well. And after doing this, I'll go ahead and cut this out. So I've cut out the back neckline first, and I've cut out the shoulder. And as you can see, I didn't get to add sewing allowance around the neckline because it is not needed at all. So after cutting this out, I'll go ahead and mark 2 inches upward from the hem like this. That is the 2 inches for the hemming allowance. I'll mark it out like this, and I'll bring in my scissors and give this point a little snip. So the reason for this snip is just so that when I'm hemming the bubu gown, it's more easier to indicate that, okay, this is where the 2 inches for the hemming allowance start from. Same thing applies to if you added 2 inches to the sleeve hem as well for the hemming allowance. So I'll go ahead and indicate the wrong side of this fabric, and I will take out the back pattern so that I can be able to draft and cut out the front neckline. So for the front neckline, I'm just going to open the front pattern like this. And at this point, I'll decide where I want the asymmetric V neckline to be. So I'm just going to make sure that the right side of the fabric is facing me. So for the asymmetric V neckline, I wanted it to be on the left side. So this is the left side of the fabric here. So I'll go ahead and mark out how deep I want this V neckline to be. So for the depth, I marked out 7.5 inches for the depth. So I mark out 7.5 inches, and I'll go ahead and connect like this to this side of the neck width. And I'll also connect from this other end of the neck width as well to the neck depth here, giving me that asymmetric neckline. So I'll go ahead and connect like this. So at this side of the asymmetric neckline, I want it to have some form of curve. I don't just want it to be straight. So I'm going to use the curve part of my rule to draw out a curve like this. I just want to get a nice curve on this side of the asymmetric neckline. So this is it. And for this side, I just want it to be a straight line. So I'll go ahead and measure out the neck depth again, so you get to see it. So you can see I have 7.5 inches as the neck depth. Moving on, I'll measure the excess left out on the neck width here, and I have half an inch. So I'll go ahead and cut out this front neckline. So the half an inch I'm cutting out from the front neck width, I'll also cut it out from the back neck width, because the back and the front neck width always has to be the same. So after cutting it out, I'll go ahead and bring in the back neckline, and from the neck width, I'll also mark out that half an inch that I stated earlier on. I'll mark out the half an inch on the neck width here, and I'll connect it back to the neck depth, and I'll go ahead and cut it out. Moving on, I'll go ahead and bring in the fabric again to cut out the interface. So I'll go ahead and fold it like this into 2. So this is optional. You can decide to make use of an interface, can decide not to make use of an interface. If you don't want to make use of an interface, you use a bias for turning the neckline. But for me, I do love interface for the necklines. Yeah, I'll mark out the shoulder measurement divided by 2, and I'll add half an inch for hemming allowance like this. So the beginning of this fabric is not straight, so I just have to cut it out to make it straight like this. And after cutting it out, I lightened the half an inch here. So for the length of the interface, I want it to be 14 inches long. You can decide how long you want your interface to be. It must not be this long. But for me, I do love a long interface, although not in all cases. So I'll go ahead and connect the length of the interface like this to the width of the interface like this, giving me this kind of a square shape. So at this edge here, I always love my interface to have a curve. So I'll just go ahead and curve it like this. I love the edge to have, this nice curve. So this is optional as well. So I'm just trying to get a nice curve here that I love. And I'll go ahead and bring in my scissors and cut this out like this. After cutting this out, I'll also use this to cut out another interface, because I'll be making use of one interface for the front neckline and one for the back neckline. And like I stated earlier on, it's not a must you must use interface for your necklines. You can make use of a bias, but for me, I just love an interface. And it's not a must your interface must be long. So I'm making use of this interface for the back neckline. So I'm just going to cut it like this. So you can see I've not cut out any neckline yet. So I'll just indicate the wrong sides of the interface so I don't get confused when I'm joining this all of this together. So for the back interface, I'll bring in the back pattern and I'll place it on the interface like this so that I can be able to cut out the back neckline on the interface. So I'll go ahead and place the back pattern well like this, and after placing it well, I'll bring in my scissors and cut out the back neckline, as you can see. So I'll just also cut out this shoulder like this to rhyme with the back shoulder as well. So the back interface is ready. So at this point, I'll also bring in the front interface and I will open it up. So I'll make sure the wrong side of the interface is facing me actually, and I'll bring in the front pattern. So after bringing in the front pattern, I'm going to place the wrong side of the front pattern on the wrong side of the interface like this, and I'll go ahead and cut out the front neckline on the interface, and I'll also cut out the shoulder so it rhymes with the front shoulder as well like this. So at this point, the front interface is ready. So right now it's time to aim it. So you can decide to aim it like this by folding half an inch twice and running a stitch around it, or you can make use of your bias. Open the side of your bias here and stitch it to the right side here at the edge, and after stitching it round, you flip it over to the wrong side and run a stitch on the other edge of the bias round. I will also be doing this on the back interface as well. I'll also hem around the back interface. After hemming around the interfaces, I'll bring in the front pattern and I'll make sure the right side of the front pattern is facing me. Then I'll go ahead and also bring in the front interface that has been hemmed around, and I'll place it on the front pattern, making sure that the right side of the interface is facing the right side of the front pattern. So after placing it, I'll go ahead and close up the neckline using 0.25 inch as my sewing allowance for closing up the neckline. So I'll go ahead and do that. And for the back pattern as well, I'll also go ahead and bring it in and open it up and make sure that the right side of the back pattern is facing me as well. I'll also bring in the back interface and make sure that the right side of the interface is also facing the right side of the back pattern. And I'll also close up the back neckline using 0.25 inch sewing allowance. So this is it. I have closed up the neckline for the front pattern. Right now it's time to sew in the tiny stripe designs, and I'll be making use of the bias for this design. So there are various methods for sewing in this design, and recall earlier on that I stated that you can make do without the interface. So if you're not using the interface for your neckline, all you have to do is to go ahead and open one side of the bias and you sew it on the wrong side of your fabric around the neckline. You sew it on the wrong side of your fabric around the neckline. Then after doing that, you now turn it over, like turning a tiny piece of the bias over to the right side and stitching it round as well on the right side. It's like you're doing piping. It's called piping. So you pipe the neckline. That's what is called piping. If you're not making use of an interface, you pipe the neckline, making sure that it's a tiny piece of the bias that is showing on the right side, maybe about 0.35 inch. Since I made use of the interface, all I have to do is to go ahead and bring out the interface, and after doing this, I'll bring in the bias that I'm making use of. So for the bias, all I have to do is to fold my bias into two. So as you can see, I'll fold it into two and I'm going to stitch it round the neckline. So in stitching it to the neckline, the bias is going to be stitched close to the joining between the interface and the front neckline. That is that joining that I used to stitch the interface to the front neckline. The bias will be stitched close to it. So I'll stitch on both sides of the folded bias. I'm going to stitch on both sides of the folded bias, and make sure that you sew on the edges of the bias to have a straight look. That gives you a neater finishing. So also make sure to iron after every stitch. It is very important. In fact, iron before and after sewing in the bias. So now that I have done this first tiny stripe, next step is to go ahead and mark out 1.5 inch from the first tiny bias. I'll mark out 1.5 inch around the neckline like this. So it is on this 1.5 inch that I will sew in the second tiny stripe design. So just go ahead and mark out 1.5 inch like this. After doing this, round it at the center of the asymmetric neckline. I'm going to try and mark out the center of the asymmetric neckline like this. Draw a straight line down, and I'm just going to curve it like this. Please watch. I'm going to curve it like this to get, the pointed part of this second tiny stripe design. So this is what I have, and I'm loving this second shape. I'm so in love with it. And after doing this, I'll bring in the tassel design, and I'm going to sew it to this pointy part here. So before sewing it, I don't want the tassel design so long, so I'm just cutting out the excess. So I'm going to use my needle and thread to sew the ropes attached to the tassel design on these lines that has been marked out on both sides, making sure that the tassel design is seated at the center of the pointy part of this line that has been marked out. I hope you understand. Yes, so I'm just using my pin to hold it in place first, so I show you how to sew in the tiny stripe as well. But I'll be using my needle and thread to sew down the tassel design first to this pointy part before I move ahead to sewing in the folded bias. So this is me just trying to make sure the tassel is seated correctly at the pointy part. So once this is tacked down using the needle and thread, the next step is to also go ahead and bring out the interface. I'll bring out the interface like this, and I'll bring in my bias, and I'll also go ahead and fold my bias into two like this. Folding it into two gives me a tiny bias. So I'll also go ahead and stitch it down on this line that I have marked out as well, and I'll stitch it on both sides as well, and I'll make sure that I sew on the edges. This gives a straight look like I stated earlier on. So I'll go ahead and do that round like this on the line that has been marked out. So I'll go ahead and do that, and once I am done doing that, I'll make sure I iron, and I'll come back and show you guys the outcome. Moving on, I'm going to cut out fabrics for the pocket piece. So I've cut out the fabrics here, and I have 4 of this. And for female pocket piece, the length is always 12 inches and the width is always 7 or 8 inches, and that is what I have cut out. So right now I'm just going to arrange this properly and curve this part of the pocket piece here. I want it to have that pocket curve at the edge. If you do not want the curve at the edge, no problem, you can just leave your pocket piece like this without no curving at the edge. But I love my pocket piece to have that curve. It's always beautiful. So after cutting out the curve, this is what I have. So I'll go ahead and bring in the front pattern, and I'm going to arrange it well. So you can see I've sewn in the tassel design and the tiny stripe. You can see how beautiful this is looking. I'm so in love with it. So right now, in sewing in the pocket piece, all I have to do is to go ahead and mark out the front waist length. So the front waist length I'm working with is 17.5 inches. So I'll go ahead and mark that out here, and I'll trace it down to the side here and mark it out on the side. So after marking it out on the side, from this front waist length, I am going to come down by 1 inch like this. So I'll come down by 1 inch on the side, and I'll clean this front waist length. So from this 1 inch, I'll mark out 6 inches. So this is where my pocket is going to be sewn to. My pocket will be sewn to from this 1 inch to the 6 inches. So I'll bring in one of the pocket piece like this, and from the beginning of the pocket piece here, I'm going to come down by half an inch like this. So after coming down by half an inch, from this half an inch, I am also going to mark out 6 inches like so. And then I'm going to place this half an inch on this 1 inch that I mark out earlier on at the side here. And I'm going to use my pin to hold it down. So I'll bring in my pin and I'll use it to hold it down like this. Moving on, I'll mark out half an inch sewing allowance for sewing the pocket piece to the side here. And I'll start from that half an inch mark that I mark out on the pocket piece earlier on and stop at the 6 inches mark here. So I'm just going to run my stitch straight down from the half an inch to the 6 inches using the half an inch sewing allowance. And I'll repeat the same thing on this other side of the front pattern as well, and I'll also do the same thing on both sides of the back pattern. So this is it for the back pattern. As you can see, I have sewn in the pocket piece You can see what we have here. So right now it's time to close off the shoulders. So I'm going to bring in the front pattern and I'll place it on the back pattern. So I'll make sure the right side of the front pattern is facing the right side of the back pattern like this. Now, if you didn't make use of an interface, you can go straight to closing of the shoulders. But since I made use of an interface, I'll bring in both interface, the front and the back interface, and place them together, making sure that the shoulder joinings are directly on each other. And I'll go ahead and close it up like this using 1/2 inch. I'll repeat the same thing on the other shoulder as well. Once this is done, the next step is to seal the interface to the main pattern using the Amy gun. So I'll go ahead and bring in my Amy gun and I'm going to place it in between the interface and the main patterns like this, and I'll place it around the necklines like this, around the necklines, around the interface. I'll just place it and I'll go ahead and iron. Doing this ensures that the interface does not disturb when putting on this dress. So after doing that, next is to hem the hem of the sleeve. So in doing that, if you made use of 2 inches allowance for the hemming of the sleeve, you go ahead and fold in the 2 inches and also fold in 1/2 inch at the edge and run a straight stitch on it. But if you're making use of a bias like me, all I have to do is to go ahead and stitch the edge of the bias to the right side of the sleeve at the edge as well, and then after stitching it down, I flip it over to the wrong side and I run a stitch on the other side of the edge of the bias. Same thing I did while aiming around the interface. So right now it's time to close up the sides of this bubble gown. So I'll go ahead and bring over the back pattern and I'll place it on the front pattern like this. So I'm just going to go ahead and arrange this properly. So I'll just do that now, and in arranging it, I'll make sure that the pocket piece are lying on top of each other like this. So you can see what I am doing. So I'll make sure the pocket piece are lying on each other like so. So I'm just arranging it. So before closing up the sides, you have to aim the down of your bubble gown. You have to aim the hem of your bubble gown by folding in the 2 inches for the aiming allowance, and after folding in the 2 inches, you fold in 1/2 inch at the edge as well, and you run a straight stitch on it. In closing up the sides, I'm going to start from the sleeve hem here. I'm going to start closing it up using 1/2 inch allowance, and I'll stop here on the first stitch, and from the second stitch here I'll continue and stitch it, and then I'll close up the pocket piece round like this, and also close up this part of the pocket piece as well. If you also want slits on your bubble gown, no problem, you can get to do that like I did, and I've done a video on that when it comes to slits for bubble gown. I'll drop the link on the description box. So I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Whitney IY, and if you enjoyed this video and if it was helpful to you, please do well to give this video a thumbs up and also hit on the subscribe button. That is how you support this channel. That is how you support me. So guys, we've come towards the end of this video, and I am so much in love with this bubble gown. So see you in my next video. Bye.